They say ignorance is bliss, and it may well be compared to knowing that you've missed out on millions or even billions of dollars because of bad decisions, bad advice, or just bad luck that turns the dream of riches into the cold awakening of what could have been. In this video, we'll look at 7 people that missed out on a fortune. Number 1. As the old timers would say, there's gold in them there hills. But in this case, it's more like the local refuse dump. Back in 2009, just after Bitcoins had been created, British IT worker James Howells jumped on the Bitcoin mining bandwagon when it was still relatively easy to find them and set his Dell laptop to work digging for Bitcoins. After about a week of data mining, he stopped due to his girlfriend complaining about the noise the laptop was making. By then, he'd found around 7,500 Bitcoins, but back then, this was worth maybe $50, and no one knew what was going to happen to the value of the currency over the next few years. At its peak in November 2013, those 7,500 Bitcoins were worth $7.3 million, and even today they are still worth around $4.3 million. In 2010, the laptop broke down after he spilt lemonade into it. James stripped it down for spares and put the hard drive containing the digital Bitcoin wallet into a drawer and basically forgot about it for the next 3 years and got on with his life. 3 years later, in 2013, James was having a clear out, and one of the items he decided to throw away was the hard drive from the Dell laptop. At the time, he said, "I had a little voice in the back of my head saying that this wasn't a good idea, but I continued to throw it away." He only realised the error a few months later when he reconnected with the Bitcoin world, but by then the hard drive, which was the size of a credit card and about 1/4 inch thick, was long gone in the local landfill dump under about 4 to 5 feet of rubbish in an area the size of a football pitch, and presumably it's still there. James has looked into retrieving it, but the cost of doing so, with no guarantee of finding it, was too prohibitive. So, somewhere in Docksway landfill site near Newport in Wales, there is a pot of digital gold at the end of a rainbow of rubbish. Number 2. Life is a game. That's what Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari, the games console maker of the 1970s, said about business. If you lose a game of chess, you don't go and jump off a bridge, you just reset the pieces and start again. And he should know. He has made some big mistakes along the way and admits that when he was 35, he was insufferable. He said, "I thought I could do no wrong and I got really sloppy." Wise and prophetic advice from a man that could have owned a third of Apple, which is now valued at over $540 billion, and for just $50,000. In the early days of Atari, Ron Wayne, we'll hear more about him later, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak had been involved in developing the Atari arcade game Breakout. Later, using parts borrowed from Atari, Jobs and Wozniak created and marketed their own home computer. Jobs offered the design to Bushnell, but Atari wasn't interested in making computers at that time, so Bushnell turned it down. In 1976, Jobs again approached Bushnell, but this time for money to fund the fledgling Apple Computer Company. He was asking for $50,000 in exchange for 1/3 of the company. Bushnell said later about it, "I was so smart, I said no." And it's kind of fun to think about that when I'm not crying about it. Number 3. Who would have thought that a simple mispronunciation would cost you $1 million? But that's what happened to Wheel of Fortune contestant Julian Batt, who turned the game show into a wheel of misfortune. Julian was competing in the popular TV game show when he had a golden opportunity to win $1 million. He correctly guessed all the letters to the answer, which was the mythological hero Achilles. But when he read the answer out to claim the prize, he said,
"Mythological hero ACHILLES."
Now, whether that is being a bit too pedantic is up for question, but the rules state that contestants must use the generally accepted pronunciation when trying to solve a puzzle. Julian also lost out on winning a car, but ended up winning the overall game and $11,700 in prize money, which is better than a poke in the eye of a sharp stick, but $988,300 less than he could have won. Number 4. Now, not a lot of people know, but Ronald Wayne was the third founder of Apple on the 1st of April 1976, along with Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. But he sold his 10% share for just $800 just 12 days later and accepted a further $1,500 to forfeit any future claims. Of course, everyone has 20/20 vision in hindsight, but this is a bit like winning the biggest lottery in history and then losing the ticket. That 10% share of Apple, even allowing for share dilution, would today be worth between $20 and $30 billion. Ron had met the two Steves whilst he was working for Atari. He was an engineer and had worked in the slot machine business and became good friends and a kind of mentor to them. Before starting Apple, Jobs said that he had access to $50,000 and asked Ronald if he would be interested in getting back into the slot machine business. Ron replied that it would probably be the quickest way to lose $50,000, and Jobs never mentioned it again. However, Ron was remembered when they were setting up Apple. He drew up the original contract that laid out the share agreement, with Jobs and Wozniak getting 45% each and Ron the remaining 10%. Ron also created the first Apple logo, with Newton sitting under a tree with an apple dangling above his head. Ron was 40 at the time of the start of Apple, and the two Steves were in their 20s. Ron said, "I felt out of my depth. They were like whirlwinds. It was like holding a tiger by the tail. If I'd have stayed with Apple, I'd have probably wound up the richest man in the cemetery." After Apple, Ron went to work for a small engineering company but kept in contact with the two Steves. In 2000, after he had attended the launch of the new Mac at the personal request of Steve Jobs, he saw a wanted ad for autographs, and he remembered the original contract he still had, which was signed by all three of the Apple founders. Thinking that he didn't need it anymore, he sold it for $500. 11 years later, in 2011, that original contract sold for $1.6 million. Ron said about it later, "In that, you have the story of my life." Ron is magnanimous about the opportunities that have passed him by and said, "I don't want to waste my tomorrows bemoaning my yesterdays. I'll handle it by going on to the next thing, and that's all that any of us can do." Number 5. Okay, so you've brought your lottery ticket online, the company have all your details in your account, and you'll never lose the paper ticket. So when your winning numbers come up on a £35 million, which is around a $50 million jackpot lottery win, you're guaranteed the money, aren't you? Well, unless you didn't actually buy the ticket in the first place. That's what happened to David and Edwina Nyland when they played the Christmas Euro Millions lottery in December 2015. They had been regular lottery players for years and had bought their tickets online, but the transaction for this purchase didn't go through because they had just 60p in the account and needed at least £2 to play. So they topped up the account with more money and tried again. Edwina said that David used an app on his iPhone to generate the numbers, and when they tried again, they got the confirmation that the transaction had gone through. When the results came up, they realised they had the winning numbers. They checked online, but there was nothing there. They then rang the lottery operator Camelot, who confirmed that they did indeed attempt to buy a ticket with the numbers, but the transaction didn't go through because they only had 60p in the account. The lottery operator said that the system had indeed recorded several attempts to buy the ticket, but no record of the topping up of the account, and as such the ticket was not purchased in time due to insufficient endowment funds. Only tickets which have been successfully purchased can be entered into the draw. David and Edwina said that they don't remember the confirmation of the top-up because the closing time for the draw was just 30 minutes away and they were in a rush because it was Christmas, but they did say that they would be contesting Camelot to try and get the prize. Number 6. Taking advice from people you trust can be tricky, especially if it turns out to be bad advice. So when Joe Green's father told him not to team up with a certain Mark Zuckerberg again after nearly being expelled from Harvard because of a previous project with him, he thought his dad could see something he couldn't. But what nobody saw was that the new startup, which was called Facebook, would become a multi-billion-dollar social media phenomenon. It started in 2003 when he was an undergraduate at Harvard University, when Green helped Zuckerberg create a website called FaceMash, which was a sort of online hot or not game. FaceMash used photos hacked by Zuckerberg from the online Facebooks of 9 university houses. It then placed 2 of them side by side and asked the user to choose the hotter person. However, the site only lasted a few days before it was shut down by the executives of Harvard, with Green and Zuckerberg facing charges of violating copyright, breaching security and infringing the privacy of the people's photos that were used, though in the end all the charges were dropped. A few months later, and after their brush with the Harvard authorities and very nearly being expelled, Zuckerberg asked Green if he would drop out of university to help him build the Facebook site with the offer of shares as part payment. He sought the advice of his father, who was a professor and didn't want to see his son drop out of university, so he advised him not to get involved. If Joe had ignored his father's advice and stayed with Zuckerberg and Facebook, his share of the business would now be worth around $10 billion. Joe said, "Zuckerberg likes to make fun of my dad for this, but we're still good friends." Number 7. It must rank as one of the worst nightmares to many, but buying a winning lottery ticket and then losing it is exactly what happened to Martin and Kay Tott back in 2001, and it also sparked a debate over corporate greed as much as the lost ticket itself. The couple became aware of an unclaimed lottery ticket that had been bought in their hometown of Watford, so they checked the numbers and yes, they had the winning numbers. The winnings were worth £3 million or around $4.2 million, but they couldn't find the ticket. They turned their apartment upside down, checked old coats, rubbish bags, drawers, everything they could think of, but they just couldn't find it. The one thing they did have in their favour though over the other 115 false claimants to the prize was that they could say where the ticket was bought and the exact time of the purchase. They could also prove that they'd been using the same numbers for 5 weeks before, all of which was confirmed by Camelot, the lottery operator. The problem they had was that there is a 30-day lost ticket time rule that states that lost tickets must be reported within 30 days of purchase, but because they had not checked the results, they didn't know about the win or the lost ticket until almost 6 months later when the unclaimed prize was announced. Camelot investigated the case for 7 weeks and concluded that they were genuine, and even though they raised a claim with the National Lottery Commission, both the Commission and Camelot said that they couldn't make an exception to the 30-day lost ticket rule, as it would then set a precedent and therefore they could not claim the prize. The couple received a lot of national support in the press by other lottery winners and celebrities, but to no avail, and they never did get the money, and the £3 million they would have won was given to good causes instead. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then don't forget to please thumbs up and subscribe for more, and if you have any ideas for videos you'd like to see, then please let us know in the comments below.